Alright, I'm going to be talking you through getting set up with IntelliJ IDEA and what some of the important organizational terms and tools mean. If you follow along with this video at the beginning of a computer science class, you're going to have a much easier time getting your code set up and running and being less confused by the tool that you're trying to work with and being able to spend more of your time actually just doing the work. So I'm going to teach you about a few things. The first is just the terminology here. So when we use the word project in IntelliJ IDEA, we're talking about something that we would use one project per computer science class. So if you took Intro to Coding and used this, you'd have an Intro to Coding project. And then you might have an AP Computer Science A project, then a Data Structures project, then a Programming Languages project. So you'll name this after the class you're taking. And a project is a really big overarching idea. Usually it's a semester or year-long class. When you go to set up a project, and we'll work through an example of all of this in a minute, you need to select an SDK. Because we're teaching Java, your software development kit will be a Java development kit or a JDK. So you can think of those as synonyms for this class. But basically, they're always releasing new versions of Java every few months and new long-term support versions every 2 years or so. And so we just want to make sure that we're using a recent version of Java and that you know which one it is. We make them available in self-service. So right now JDK 19 is available in self-service, and they're available online as well. But basically you set the version of the language that you're using at the project level, and then you never have to think about it the rest of the year. If you set it there and all of your modules use the same SDK level. Another thing you set at the project level, or you can, is called the out folder. And so Java is a compiled language, so the code you write gets compiled down into binary files that we as humans are never really meant to look at. It's literally just ones and zeros, and that's what actually gets run on the computer. That's part of what makes Java pretty fast. And so we have to set a place for all those files to live, and the typical standard is just to create a folder called out at the top of your project. So right inside your data structures folder, or right inside of your programming languages folder, you make a file called out, a folder called out, and you set that in a configuration. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But basically you tell it, every time you compile a class, put the compiled class file in this out folder. They all go in one place, kind of out of the way, and we don't have to look at them as people. So we just have to set that up at the beginning to make IDEA happy, and then we never think about it again. Save Actions is an awesome tool. This is an add-on, like a little plugin for IntelliJ IDEA, where every time you save your work with Command S, it'll run and it auto-formats your code. So it does all the indentation and all the spacing, makes things look really nice, but it'll also help you spot errors when indentation doesn't look right because you're missing a bracket or something like that. And so it saves you a lot of time. It'll also help you spot errors. It's really easy to install. You just have to set it up at the beginning of each project or the beginning of each computer science class, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute as well. A module is what we use within a computer science class to separate big ideas. So just like we teach the class in units, we will organize our code into modules. So it'll be one module per unit. So if you were taking AP Comp Sci A, you'd have somewhere between 6 and 10 units during the year. That's pretty typical of most of our Comp Sci classes. And so just think, if you're in a new unit in class, you're going to make a new module in IntelliJ IDEA. And they show up as a folder with a little blue square, which we'll see in a minute. A package is a smaller delineation than a module. So within a single module, you might have several packages. So for data structures, your Unit 1 module might have 4 separate packages. One for code pertaining to static arrays, a different one for all your code pertaining to dynamic arrays, one for code that pertains to stacks, and then another package for queues. And so a package just helps us to organize our code even further, because you might have several classes including a main related to stacks, and several classes including a main related to queues, and you want to keep them separate so we know which main to run. And so we organize things into packages. I'll show you how to do that as well. So those are the basics of the big ideas for using IntelliJ IDEA. And so I'm going to open it up now and kind of walk through, if I were getting started on a new class, we'll pretend we had a class on artificial intelligence. We'll use that as the example. So if I come in IntelliJ IDEA, the first thing I might do when I open it, when I see this window, of course you wouldn't have all of these projects because you might be opening it for the first time, but there's a little plugins option over here. If you click on Marketplace and then you search Save Actions, you'll find this is the Save Actions plugin I'm talking about, and you'll want to install it, and then you have to restart your IDE. But that's how you can install Save Actions, and then once per project we have to actually go manually turn it on, but this is the plugin that does the auto formatting. So if we go to projects, I'm going to create a new project, and I'm going to call this Intro to AI. Maybe that's the theoretical class we're offering. Instead of downloads, that's not where I want to store this, I'm going to click on this folder and tell it where I actually want it to go, which would be my documents folder. So I'll hit open. So it's going to go in the documents folder. Our project will be called Intro to AI. And I think this is going to make a new folder called Intro to AI. I'm hoping it does. If not, we would want to make a folder and put it there. So our language is going to be Java. Our build system will be IntelliJ. And the JDK, I'm going to make sure I choose 19. That's the most recent one. And I'm going to uncheck Add Sample Code. We don't need any sample code. We're going to do it from scratch. So we'll hit Create. And we'll see a couple of things, right? We've got actually one module created. This is that little folder icon with the blue square I was talking about. Automatically, your project folder gets turned into a module, but we're never going to run from there. We're going to be more organized. So let's just double check. If I go into Documents, you'll see Intro to AI was created as a folder, and it has a little source folder and this IML. That's an IntelliJ formatting file. Basically, you don't need to ever manually open that. It just keeps track of all your preferences for how things look on the screen. And so I'm going to close this. Instead of just putting code directly into the source folder for the entire class, right, we want to organize things into one module per unit. And so I can either hit Command semicolon, or I can go to File, and let me see where this is listed, Project Structure. Here, there's lots of useful things. So at the project level, one, this is where I set my SDK. So if it wasn't already set, it would show up as no SDK. I would choose 19, or I would go to Add JDK and grab it from wherever self-service saved it. And our language level looks fine at SDK default. The name looks fine. We're gonna also now look at modules, and you'll notice in the list we have a module called Intro to AI. We're never gonna use that module. That's just the whole class. So we would hit add, this little plus sign, a new module, and we might call it Unit 1. Maybe we call that Supervised Learning. Okay, we're gonna make sure that's saved in the Intro to AI folder, and that all of these things are just as we chose before. Java, IntelliJ, our SDK, and not adding sample code. So we'll hit create. When we hit create, you'll notice now our Unit 1 module exists, and it automatically has a source folder inside of it created by IntelliJ. That's awesome. We don't have to do that work now. You'll notice it's here. It's a folder with a blue square, and if we expand it, you'll see there's a source folder inside of it. This is where I'm going to put any runnable code. Now, we might have multiple ideas within our first unit on supervised learning, and so what we can also do is inside of it, oops, if I right click on it, I can make a new, I thought I could make a new package. Maybe it has to be, we might have to have some code first. So, within source, that's what we're doing, a new package. So if I right click on this source folder where my code lives, we can make a new package. And so we might, whatever our first project is, packages can't have spaces in their names, but we might call it first project. And we might have a different package for our second project. Oops. So both of these live within the source folder, but they are separate. And so within first project, I might have a main class where I create some runnable code, where I put a public static void main of string array args, and something just like printing out hello world. Okay, so as soon as I save this, in a moment here, I should get the idea that I can run this. I'm wondering why it's not actually letting me run yet. Interesting. Might have to just close it and reopen it. Not sure, but you'll notice the package is noted up there. This code should be runnable. Let me see what our configurations. We'll come back to that in a moment. But basically, we've now got a project, which pertains to our class, a module, which pertains to a unit, and then within that module, we've got two different packages, which pertain to sub-ideas within that unit. If we want to turn on save actions, we can hit Command, comma, or we can go to IntelliJ Preferences. And down here, if you've installed save actions, you'll see it in this list. So you can click on it, and we can choose Activate Save Actions on Save. Before saving each file, perform the configured actions below. Then these are the actions. So I'm going to choose just to reformat the file. You could also choose any of these others, like optimizing imports can be nice at times. It can also be annoying at times. And so we're just going to hit OK. And now you'll notice if I were to do some weird formatting stuff, oops, and I hit save, my code snaps back to being formatted perfectly, which is really nice. So I'm not really sure why I'm not able to run this code. I'm going to sort into that on my own time, but this still allows us to get our project organized, up and running. If I were to come in here and make another main class, the names aren't going to conflict, so I'm going to copy my code out of the first one into the second one. From the second project. And you'll notice we have two different files called main, but they're separate from each other because they're in different packages, which is really nice. And so you might have a main class for every project that you do, so you can actually run your code, and this is going to allow us to organize things in that way. After a minute of looking at this, I realized the reason I wasn't able to run my code was just that I had a spelling mistake. This main is the name of a function. It should start with a lowercase letter. As soon as I fix that, right, this is the name of a class, name of a function, I get these little green arrows that allow me to run my code. And so we'll put from the first project, just so we can prove that these are running the right code. If I hit this green arrow, I get the option to run main. These arrows really do the same exact thing. Doesn't matter which one you hit. But when I hit run, you'll see that my code actually compiled and ran. Now, I guess it figured out the out folder on its own, but in the case that it didn't and you get an error about needing to configure your out folder, you can always go to File, Project Structure, and under Project, Compiler Output, you could click this folder and make an out folder. So it already made Documents Intro to AI/out, but if it didn't, you could make that yourself and direct it to it. And that way you wouldn't get that error. So when I click that green arrow, I get hello from the first project. If I go fix my mistake in the second project, I now have green arrows here, and if I run it, you'll see that it's running different code, even though they're both called main. So here's my second project. So hopefully this helps you to get up and running and organized with IntelliJ IDEA. The only other thing I would really encourage you to do is to use GitHub Desktop to not only have your code organized on your machine, but to regularly, and I mean like every 20 minutes while you're working, push it to GitHub so that it's preserved in case something happens to your laptop. Thanks for watching.